They're just getting up.
It's full of children, and I don't want to be bothersome.
Okay, Mike, why don't you tell me a little bit? Okay, I want to confirm that we're live. Or Billy, maybe you can help me if you can hear me.
I really shouldn't do this for a whole lot longer. I probably can't do 2 hours like we did last time.
Yeah, I understand. Okay, so we are live. I really don't know where to start, actually, because, you know, your last few... First of all, my guess is you weren't expecting the reaction in the YouTube comments that you did get. Am I correct in that?
Yeah. Yeah, I was attempting to make a reductio ad absurdum argument, and it didn't seem like anyone really understood that. And it was a lot of accusations of tap dancing. I just thought this was a conversation. I think part of a conversation is being able to agree of finding common ground where we can have conversations. And I was just kind of caught off guard a little bit by some of the words were very kind, very open, and I thought very well thought out. Others were, it's YouTube, so some of them are pretty crazy.
Yeah, you're right. There's definitely going to be people on either side.
Sure. Are we live, by the way?
Yeah, we are live.
Okay. Sorry about that.
My thoughts after it was done was I did think you were tap dancing. I did think you were bloviating. I did think you were condescending. However, that didn't bother me. Not at all. But I noticed there was more than just one or two comments that made that accusation of you, that you were condescending. Like, for example, things like, have you read such and such? Well, of course not. Did you know this? Like, you know nothing about me other than what I've posted on videos. And I have no idea how many videos of me you've watched. How many have you watched?
4 or 5.
Okay. And I have no idea if you've watched the ones where I talk about knowledge, epistemology, truth. I've done videos on these things. Now, I'm not a philosopher. I'm not, claiming to be an expert, but I've given thought to these things. So when you're lecturing me about what knowledge is and what belief is and how they're intertwined, I know all this.
I guess I didn't understand why you didn't understand my objection then. I mean, if you knew what I was talking about, why did my objection seem to you?
Very simple. You were basically saying that I fell into the trap of atheism, of separating belief from knowledge.
Well, let me, if I can defend myself here a little bit. Let's start off. I don't do these kind of video conversations very often, ever, actually. So that's one element I think that has to be understood. I think a second one is the issue of I'm an external processor. What that means is I speak things out loud that I'm thinking because I don't understand, or I can't even process whether what I'm saying is rational or not until I've said it. I'm just an external processor. So when I say things like, have you read that? Of course not. It's just me thinking to myself out loud. And I understood, I went back and watched it and I said, yeah, I could see why that would look very condescending. It was not my intention. I'm just an external processor. And, I'll try not to do that this time. It was just a good learning experience in that sense.
Yeah. And again, I'm being very honest here. It didn't bother me because I've become immune to it. from all the interviews I've done and all the conversations I had. So it didn't bother me. But when I hear, these things like, oh yeah, it's an atheist cop-out to separate belief from knowledge. No, it isn't. It is not a cop-out. And I tried to explain that to you with the pen. I believe my pen will drop, and I know my pen will drop. I believe there's going to be a recession in 2 years, but I don't know that there will. That's a clear-cut example of how beliefs and knowledge are different.
Beliefs and knowledge are different in the ways, certainly the ways that we speak about them. But, when it comes down to really thinking about and contemplating these things, what we think we know, I don't want to reiterate this again, what we think we know and what we believe are not as separated as we think. You and I don't have to agree on that. You can say, I think I know some things. I'm glad you think you know some things. I think we know some things as well, but I'm just saying it's just not as easily separated. That's just.
I hear what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. And I think the word confidence is key when separating belief from knowledge. I say I know something when my confidence is extremely high. Could I be wrong? Yes. I say that I believe something, but I don't know it if my confidence is low.
Mm-hmm.
I could still be right even if I have low confidence, and I could be wrong even if I have high confidence. But when people say they know something, what they're really saying is, I'm confident this is true. That's how I view it.
Okay.
And I totally get what you were saying about my thought experiment, that it wasn't a good one because we're comparing two different things. We're comparing something that we could potentially get evidence for today, like the dragon, or comparing it to something that happened a long time ago. I get that. But here's the problem I have. We're left with saying that the evidence today is better than evidence back then.
I think that's. I think that just it kind of in some ways goes without saying, only in the sense that it's always better to see with your own eyes. I mean, if you're going to go back to confidence and you're going to talk about knowledge as being confident, well, I mean, then I'm only ever confident of what I'm seeing with my own eyes. And in that sense, then, yeah, all historical knowledge is, we are less confident in it. But that just goes back to because we're kind of self-absorbed people who like to see things with our own eyes.
Okay, so this is great. So we're in agreement then that our confidence could be, is higher today on certain things than 2,000 years ago.
Well, I mean, I guess you can say that. I mean, in the spirit of keeping the conversation moving forward, yeah, I guess you could. But I mean, can we do a thought experiment? I'll try to make it be fair. Let's say, for example, I were to have my head chopped off on this podcast, and blood goes everywhere, and everyone's all and then my wife comes upstairs, and somehow they take me to the hospital, and you watch us go to the hospital, and you see all this stuff unfolds, and then she puts my head back on, prays over it, and my head is put back on. Just, this is kind of it's a weird thing, probably highly improbable, but something that you might consider, wow, that's kind of supernatural. People don't pray and put heads back on. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. Well,
yeah, okay.
I would say it's definitely weird, rare, wacko. I don't know.
Sure. Weird, wacko, unbelievable, what you might put into your box of supernatural things, right?
Yeah. Or it might just be an amazing trick.
Okay. I mean, obviously what you want to do is make sure the video isn't some kind of fake or some kind of movie, or things of that nature. So we're assuming that you get all that. My point is this. You fast forward, say, 500 years into the future. Okay? Let's say you and 10,000 people all see this video, and they all see it happen live. And they fast forward 500 years into the future. Now, since you're 500 years into the future, maybe the video survived, maybe it's not. Maybe people would be just as skeptical of a video 500 years from now as we are of written documents from 500 years ago. All they're going to have are the written accounts of whoever decided to write down their version of the events, if they chose to or they chose not to. How many of that would choose to write it down, and then how many of those written down accounts would get preserved 500 years from now? And so what I'm getting to is that you're not going to get, I mean, would you call me getting my head attached on an extraordinary event?
If that, yeah, I would.
You would. Now, what kind of evidence in 500 years is going to meet the qualification for extraordinary evidence?
I can tell you. I'll answer it right now.
Sure.
Okay, so let's say we're in this thought experiment. You cut off your head. It comes back on.
Sure.
Number one, it's being broadcasted live.
Sure.
Okay, so we have video evidence.
No, you missed the point. I'm talking about in 500 years.
Right.
You're sitting here in 500 years. How are you going to get this?
Right. So there's potential 500 years from now that we will have video evidence if it survives. If it's in the cloud.
If it survives.
It's in the cloud.
Sure. Maybe.
Okay, that's better than what we have for Jesus right there.
True.
Number two, you're right. We could have people could be writing it down as they see it. In fact, they could be tweeting their friends, and
Sure.
and the number of people coming onto this live stream could go into the thousands.
Sure. Right.
Okay, and then if this is such an impressive thing that we're all seeing, someone who actually lives close to you might run to your house,
Right.
knock on the door,
Sure.
and if you are a normal human being, if your head's
Right.
cut off, there's blood. We now have forensic evidence.
Yeah, but all of this is not necessarily accessible 500 years to the future.
Okay, but hang on. But now we have forensic evidence that can actually potentially be put away, vaulted, put in slides like your blood.
Okay.
I've now mentioned three things that we would potentially have 500 years from now that we don't have for Jesus.
Right. Right.
So I would say the evidence of you cutting your head off, even 500 years in the future, looking back, is way better than what we have for Jesus.
Well, one, I mean, you can't guarantee what's going to make it into the future.
I agree.
There's no guarantee of what gets made into the future. And so, we didn't even have evidence of Pontius Pilate existing until they found the Pilate inscription. Was it 1960, 1961, I think they found. And this was the guy who ruled Palestine for like 10 years. We don't have any written documents.
And I know we disagree on this. But
well, I mean, it's not a matter of disagreement. This is just a matter of historical record.
Hang on. This is what we disagree on. Not that evidence for Pilate exists. I'm not disagreeing with that. What I'm disagreeing with is that's great that we found this evidence for Pilate. It's wonderful. My salvation is not based on it.
Yeah, and I hear what you're saying. But that really isn't germane to evaluating historical evidence.
Okay, so let's talk about evidence now.
What we're blurring together here is spiritual significance with historic evidence.
Let's talk about the evidence. Do you believe the four Gospels are written by eyewitnesses?
Well, personally, I think so. I think there's specifically John has way too much there that it looks like it's written by eyewitnesses. Luke, he doesn't say he's an eyewitness. He says he interviewed eyewitnesses. Mark is connected to Peter, who once again he wasn't an eyewitness, but it's a copy of the sermons. If we're going to go by Eusebius, it's a copy of the sermons of Peter that weren't put in order. The only one that's really left is Matthew, and there's some questions about Matthew because according to Papias, he wrote it in I think it was Hebrew. Yeah, he wrote it in Aramaic, and there's no account of a Greek version.
My question was, do you believe the Gospels were written by eyewitnesses? You would say probably.
I'd say John for sure. Luke never claims it. Mark doesn't really claim to be written by the eyewitnesses. It just is a record of the stories.
Okay, so
Matthew might be. I think there's some good evidence Matthew was.
I'm hearing you say that Luke and Mark weren't eyewitnesses, but they heard information from other eyewitnesses.
Sure, that's what Luke claims specifically in chapter 1.
So then my question then would be, no, Mark was not written by an eyewitness. He just heard things from another eyewitness. And Luke was not written by an eyewitness. He just heard things from an eyewitness. So now we got half the Gospels not written by eyewitnesses. 2 of the 4 not written by eyewitnesses.
Okay.
Would you agree with that?
Sure.
Okay. Now, of the other 2 that are actual disciples, as told in the Bible, Matthew and John, of what's written there, what percentage of it do you think are eyewitness accounts? Because Matthew wasn't there to witness the nativity scene. He, according to the story, he hadn't even met Jesus yet. So he definitely didn't witness that. So what percentage of what we have left of those 2 Gospels were actually eyewitness accounts? Maybe, I don't know, 50%? Like when Jesus is praying by himself. Matthew didn't witness that, did he?
Yeah, I guess not.
So my point is, okay, if we're going to talk about evidence, then let's look at what we really have. We don't have, at best, we have maybe, we could say 40% of the Gospels are eyewitness accounts. And for Luke, who maybe got his information from Peter, he never says that in the actual account. He never says, I, Luke, got this data, this information from Peter. No, that's a later guess, I would say.
That's not what he says. If you take the text, what he says is, I carefully investigated all these events. Now, that's not a light claim. That's a claim to have done history in the vein of Herodotus. I don't know how to do this without sounding condescending. Okay, I just don't know how to do this without sounding condescending.
Okay, no, that's fine. What I'm hearing you say is that it probably is true that Peter gave it to Luke. That's fine. I'll grant you that.
Okay,
you can have that.
Here's the reality. Josephus wasn't even alive when Herod wrote when Herod was alive. He was dead long before Josephus was even born. Yet historians take what Josephus says and they say, this is a guy who's in the right place at the right time to know the things that he knows. And what it's going to require is you're going to have to demonstrate evidence that what he's claiming to know is wrong.
Okay, so the default position that is right.
If I were to,
are you talking about Josephus?
Yeah, Josephus.
Okay.
What has to happen is you have to have some kind of evidence that you can say, Josephus, we know Josephus got X right here, so we are in good logic and reasoning to say he got this piece of evidence right here. That's just kind of how it's done. We don't have a whole lot on Herod. Now, do we know Herod existed? Yes, there's external evidence that Herod exists. He's mentioned in several of the other sources, but we are talking about the king of Israel. I mean, he's the king of a small province, but he's still a king of a province. Josephus is giving us a lot of background information that we don't have, other than what we have through him.
Right, Josephus, who...
Herodotus didn't witness the things that he said he was witness. He was just simply alive when the events themselves occurred.
Mike, where do you think Josephus got his information from regarding Jesus? Who's his sources?
Where do you think Josephus got his sources?
Who are Josephus' sources for Jesus?
Well, who are Josephus' sources for anything? At some point you kind of have to go, well, it makes sense that, for example, in Herod, he would have had the royal archives to be able to pull from. He would have royal accounts to be able to pull from.
I'm talking about Jesus. Who do you think the sources are?
That's what I'm trying to get to, Doug.
And don't try to get to it. Just get to it. Who are the sources? Who are the sources for Jesus?
They would be people in Israel during his lifetime. He would have been born in the late 40s, early 50s. There are Christians running around Israel at the time. Okay. There would have been people alive who had talked to Jesus, who Josephus would have known.
How old would they have been?
How old would
You said that there would be people alive that Josephus could talk to. How old do you think they were?
Well, Josephus wrote around 70, started writing in 70. Remember, I'm processing out loud, okay?
That's fine.
I'm an external processor. Josephus wrote around 70 AD, started writing around 70 AD. The war goes from 60 to like 70, 71. He wouldn't have started right away. So he would have been had to talk to people in the 60s, certainly in the 50s. He would have been speaking to people who were 20 years after the event of Jesus, in the 50s, maybe in the 40s.
So Josephus himself would have been, he was born in 30. So you're saying when he was like in his early 20s, he's talking to people about Jesus, and then he decided to publish it or write it down in the 90s?
Yeah. I mean, he writes the events that happened in the Jewish War happens in 67, from 68 to 70, 71.
Okay, so I hope you can understand where I'm coming from, because what I'm hearing you say is Josephus was born sometime in the 30s, after Jesus apparently died and rose from the dead. And you're telling me that when he was maybe even a teenager, he heard these things, decided not to write anything down about it until the 90s.
Yeah. He wrote it down specifically because he was captured by Titus, who was coming in as a general. And Josephus, I mean, have you seen the Jewish antiquities? I mean, these are big books. You had to have a patron to someone who's going to pay you to write these things down.
Do you know the date of when Josephus wrote about Jesus? Like what it's been dated to by historians? Yeah,
it's between probably, I don't know the exact date. I know he started writing after the war, and I think he finished it in the 90s. I believe he finished it in the early 90s.
The number I have is 93.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So we've established that at least 50% of the Gospels are not written by eyewitnesses. We've established that Josephus, who was born after Jesus' resurrection, apparently, wrote about Jesus in the 90s, and he's the first guy to do so. And
no, he's not the first guy to do so. Paul is in the 50s.
Sorry, I mean extra biblical.
Oh, well, why would the biblical records not be historical?
Oh, we can talk about that. But I'm just saying, I put Josephus in a different category in quotes. Okay. Because it's not, it's one touted by a lot of Christians. So what I'm saying is that it seems to me that the information, the source that Josephus would have is either a source that he had when he was in his 20s and decided not to write about it until 70 years later, or it was a source that was pretty current to the time of his writing and it was hearsay.
Josephus has 2 lines about Jesus in his Antiquities. He has 2 lines. He isn't writing about Jesus.
Right. I agree.
Writing a dissertation. He's writing about the Jewish people. He's writing specifically to defend why the war started with Rome. So he mentions him in a incidental manner. Why would he not write something down in his 20s? Well, we don't know that he didn't, number one. True. Number 2, why would we don't have it. If he wrote it, we don't have it. Nobody would have kept it. It's some of the stuff that just wouldn't have got kept. I
guarantee you, if you were to chop your head off and put it back on tonight, people would write about it and keep it.
Yeah, but okay. But where are you going to put my blood, Doug?
Oh,
On the little slot.
you can store blood for a long, long time,
Yeah,
probably
yeah. Where are
centuries.
you going to store it?
Oh, you could hire facilities where
You're going to hire a facility. You were going to hire a facility. Are you going to pay for it?
yes, I'll pay up to $1 million.
You are going to pay for it
Yes.
for the next 500 years.
Yes.
How much is that going to be for you to contain a little vial of blood? $35,000. You're going to pay $35,000.
Yes, I got it on me.
Really?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. If anyone out there thinks he's going to pay $35,000 to store a little tiny vial of blood, you can post on this posting and say that you think he would.
You see the smile on my face? Because all of this is irrelevant. So
actually, it's not, because this is about how history gets retained. Some things don't get retained. They just don't get retained.
okay, do you agree that some historians say that what Josephus did write about Jesus is a forgery, at least some of it?
Yes, there's some interpolated elements. The first line about Josephus, where he says, I remember, I'm doing this from memory. Josephus says there was a man named Jesus. He was a great worker of wonderful deeds. He was the Christ, the Son of God. I think.
Okay. So now
that part is particularly interpolated. Then he has another line where he talks about James, the brother of Jesus, who was killed. That's several lines later. So he mentioned Jesus twice.
I've mentioned some of the evidence, the historical evidence. We talked about the Gospels. We talked about Josephus. We can talk about Paul soon. But at this point, I'm very curious to know, where's your confidence that Jesus actually rose from the dead? Because remember, we started this live stream talking about confidence and how that can be a good metric to use to determine when you say you know something versus you believe something. Do you know Jesus rose from the dead, or do you believe Jesus rose from the dead?
I think it is pretty historically certain that Jesus was dead, and then he was seen again by his followers. Does that prove that he's divine? I think that's a faith statement.
I don't even.
I think it's pretty historically certain.
Yeah, I'm not even interested in the divine question yet. I'm just interested in the.
I think it's pretty historically certain that Jesus was dead and then he was seen alive again. This is what's called the minimal facts. Gary Habermas boiled down almost hundreds of scholars, and the general consensus is of the 5 general facts about Jesus.
Yeah, I hate the minimal facts, and here's why. It has the word minimal in it. I like more facts rather than less.
Right. Yeah, that's clever.
It's not clever. It's true.
No, it's clever.
So if your confidence, what I'm hearing you say is your confidence is very, very, very high.
Yeah, it's very high. That's what happened. Jesus was killed. That's what happened. Jesus was killed, and his apostles believed they saw him again. Okay. They believed, and he was not a ghost. He was not an apparition. His disciples believed fully that he was alive again. So and they went to their deaths believing it.
Given that what we just talked about, that maybe upwards to 60% of the Gospels were not written by eyewitnesses.
Yeah, so?
That doesn't lower your confidence a little bit?
No, not even remotely.
Okay.
Not even remotely.
Okay. And given the fact that Josephus wrote in 93, 60 years after the fact, and you've admitted some of its forgeries, that doesn't lower your confidence?
Nope.
What would lower your confidence? Anything?
What would lower my confidence? Well, let's start with you. What was the last historical research you've ever done? Of any type. And I'll make a comparison. When I was 23 years old, I did, for my bachelor's degree in history, I had to do.
I'm not a historian. I'm just gonna play along and say none. I've never done history.
Okay, fine. I did the life and death of the Fowlerton Church here in Indiana. I was messing with original sources. Now it's English. I was messing with original sources. I was talking to eyewitnesses. I was interviewing people. That was just for my bachelor's degree. that was my first interjection into the world of history. And what I found, to be quite frankly, was I was handling Sunday school materials from 1914. I was looking at, now just bear with me, please. I was looking at things that talked about the weather, that talked about the number of people that were there at church that day, who were doing these kinds of things. So I began to research these things. I tried to begin to find what every historian should do is outside corroboration. How do I get outside corroboration? Now, this is from 1914. We're not talking 2,000 years ago. Do you know what I found for outside corroboration?
What?
You can get a few newspaper articles about the church being there. You can get the property rights of the church being in that position. There's no way to verify who was there, what the numbers were, the people that were there. It's just gone. That information is just gone. It's just not there. And what I had to deal with is I had to look at primary sources that I couldn't verify. And I had to say, what is my confidence level that these people are lying? There are certain things that I could verify. If I wanted to go to newspapers, I could look up the weather, what the weather had turned out that day for those Sundays. But in terms of external sources that I could verify, I could have went to denominational headquarters and pulled the denominational numbers and tried to bounce those off the local church's numbers. But there was no way to verify those, because where was the denominational records getting theirs from? Well, they were getting them from the church. So they're self-referential.
Okay,
now,
so am I hearing you say that it's just impossible to?
No, it's not impossible. It's just when you start actually doing historical research, really doing history, these are just the realities that you find.
Okay.
It's just what it's like. You don't end up with 100% certainty. There's no outside corroborating evidence.
Okay, good. Mike, you just said it. You do not get 100% certainty. So my question is, why are you so confident then?
Well, because I know how history's done, and that's why I said what I said before. As certain as anyone can be certain about history in any way, shape, or form, as certain as I can be about anything, I'm as certain as Jesus' resurrection historically. It's too well attested. It's got too many angles from too many different points of view. You talk about Josephus writing in 96, 93 AD. Well, he didn't hear that story in 93 AD. He wrote it down in 93 AD. He couldn't have got that information for the first time. He probably heard it as a child in the 40s and the 50s, where he would have heard that. Now that makes it entirely different. And for you, it turns into this huge deal. It wasn't written down till 93. Well, information doesn't suddenly come into being when an author writes it down. That's just not how it works. So until you've actually dug through sources, until you've actually handled materials in your hand, looked at history, and tried to dig those things out, until you've done that, I can't explain to you why some of the things that you're saying, they're not that important.
They're not that important? What's not important?
Josephus is in the time and place. He's a person.
All you have to do is say one word. So you're saying Josephus is not that important.
No. What's not important? The things that you're talking about. For example, Josephus didn't write about Jesus until 93 AD. Well, you don't know that. I mean, he didn't write the book in 1 year.
Okay, so you're saying, okay. Well, let me do a follow-up question then. If there's only one source for a historical event, do you lower your confidence then?
No, what you do is you weigh evidences. You, like for the work that I was doing on this church. What motivation did these people have to grossly inflate their numbers? What was the motivation for that? Well, the penalty is the pastor can get removed by the district superintendent if he finds out they're lying. Now, is that something that you can put down into a book? Well, no. But these are evidences that you weigh. What motivation do these people have to grossly distort the facts? As I'm looking as I'm holding the Sunday school material that I can't verify, I go, there's not a great deal of motivation to lie. The pastor gets paid by the people who come. He isn't paid by some larger denomination. The people who are paying him are the one who knows whether he's telling the truth or not. So I look at this evidence.
I get it. So you're saying that there wasn't a motivation to lie for Jesus?
Actually, there was a lot of motivation to lie for Jesus.
No, I mean, like from his followers.
Yeah, there's a lot of motivation for them to lie. Death being one of them. The fact that they didn't, the fact that they were called to give up earthly comfort and earthly gain. That is, there's a great motivation to lie. Jesus didn't tell us to sacrifice ourselves and give it to the poor. Jesus told us to hoard our wealth and to hold it in. That's what Jesus told us. There's a motivation to lie. That is a motivation that means something to me. The problem is that's not what they do. That's not what the authors of the scriptures do. They don't give the lie that makes sense to lie.
Okay, so you're saying there was some motivations for Christians to lie back then, but it would just
sure.
Okay.
But they don't do what the lie would have provided. They don't do what was in their best interest to lie for. If they're lying against their own best interests. If Peter made up Jesus' sayings, and he's making these things up, and he's talking about Jesus saying, give to the poor, give to the needy, and Jesus never said that. And he's giving these things away. What motivation is he getting out of that?
Would you think then...
if he said hoard money and give it to me, that would make sense. But that's not what he says.
There's so many ways I can go here. I want to get back to the history part because this is what I think you are interested in. And I asked you the question, would you lower your confidence if there was only one source for a claim back 2,000 years ago?
2,000 years ago? Yeah, I'd lower the confidence.
Okay, so if we were to go through every claim in the Gospels where it's not mentioned in another Gospel, would you then lower your confidence in that claim?
I'll do you one better. I'll give you an illustration of what I'm talking about. In the book of First Clement, which is where I'm working on a dissertation on, it mentions a bird called the phoenix. Now, as far as I can tell, it's only mentioned one other time by Pliny the Elder in his natural history. He mentions a bird called the phoenix. That gives me two sources, Pliny the Younger and Clement of Rome. They don't exactly line up. They're not talking about they speak about it differently, but it talks about it happening in Egypt. Pliny the Elder, goes to Egypt. I don't know if he went to Egypt to be able to confirm these things or not. So we have two sources concerning the bird called the phoenix that not a lot of people give a lot of confidence in. As far as we can tell, Pliny the Elder didn't see the bird called the phoenix.
I'm interested in what you believe. So do you...
And neither did Clement. He heard about it and he spoke about it. So there are things that are written down that we don't have corroborating evidences for, and we have good reason to suspect they didn't see them or were in a place or a time to be able to corroborate those things. Clement of Rome is living in Rome. He's telling a story that he heard.
Mike, I don't want to talk about Clement. I want to talk about Jesus.
I know you do, but I'm talking to you about history.
Okay, and I am too, the history of Jesus. So I asked you the question, if you had only one source for a claim within the New Testament, within the Gospels, would you lower your confidence in that claim because you only have one source?
This is once again, this is one of those slicing away at the pears, trying to create. Sure, I guess it would lower the confidence level. Sure.
Now, you've studied the New Testament, you've studied the Gospels. How many claims, and I honestly don't know the answer to this, but how many claims in the Gospels are only found within one Gospel or in one part of the New Testament? Do you, like in a percentage?
Percentage? I can't off the top of my head. Mark is somewhere like 80% of it is found in Luke and Matthew.
And then 70% of Matthew
is found in Luke, and then there's a good amount of Luke that is not found in Matthew or Mark. There's a good amount of Mark.
But this is what I'm getting at, Mike, because We've
And then
already we've already talked about how 2 of the 4 Gospels are not eyewitnesses, nor do they claim to be. And of the 2 that's left, there's certain claims in there that couldn't have been eyewitness accounts, like Jesus' birth. So we now have a situation where eyewitness accounts are in the minority within the Gospels in its entirety. And of those, we're now talking about 10 to 30%, between 10 and 30% of what's left has only one source. That was an eyewitness. You following me?
Hold on just a second. Can you hold on just a second? Please, just a second. Yeah, okay.
I like that red paint.
I'm sorry, it's my wife. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. She wants to know why I'm not in bed.
I'm going to get in trouble, aren't I?
That's what it means to be. So,
if you need to go anytime.
No.
But you see what I'm getting at is that I'm trying to present reasons why I lower my confidence, and I'm asking you, why are we so different? Why? Like, we agree on so much. We agree that on the percentage of eyewitnesses, we agree that if we have only one source compared to 2, we should lower our confidence. Why is your confidence so much higher than mine?
How much history have you done?
Do you have to be a historian in order to believe in the resurrection of Jesus?
How much history have you done?
I'll just say 0.
Okay.
Which is probably a lie, because I probably have done some, but...
You probably have done some.
Yeah.
You've probably done research before.
Oh, yeah.
Listen, what you're doing, anyone can do with anything, okay? How many eyewitness accounts do we have of written eyewitness accounts do we have of the battle of Hastings?
What do you predict I'm going to say to your question?
You're going to say you don't know.
No. I'm saying, what do you predict I'm going to say about the purpose of your question?
You're going to say it's not relevant.
Why would I say that?
I don't know, because maybe you don't understand what I'm talking about.
No. The reason why I'm going to say that it's not relevant to Jesus is because, and I've said this already on this live stream and on the past live stream, and I know you don't like this word, but number 1, did they make extraordinary claims? And number 2, are we talking about anything that's going to impact my life and especially my eternal life? Jesus made claims that are both extraordinary, in my opinion, and impacts my life and my eternal life, if true.
Absolutely.
All the other examples you're giving me don't.
Yep.
So as much as I probably do care a lot about the specific histories, in the context of this conversation, I don't care.
Right. And this is why the historical issue is so very important. Because, Doug, there's a two-way street here. You kind of believe that I have a motivation, that I'm looking at this evidence. You're kind of curious why I'm so confident, and these kind of different things. There's a two, and you told the world this in our last conversation. You said basically my experience when I was a teen dictated how I was going to read the evidence.
That was my guess. I could be wrong.
Yeah, that's what you said.
Yes.
Basically, my prior belief system tainted the way I read the evidence, because what I wanted to have become true, I have, and this is the whole thing that you're driving at, Doug. What I want to have true, I'm going to look at the evidence and concoct it to be the way that I consider it to be. This is a double-edged sword, Doug. It cuts both ways.
Okay,
examining the evidence.
I agree. Now, the question is, how do we fix it?
I don't think we can. Jesus' claims are radical. Jesus' claims do have implications for our life. They do. They demand a response. And I'm not going to deny that that's not the case. Of course, they make those kind of claims, but that's a double-edged sword. It puts a sword into my soul, but it also cuts one into yours.
Right, but this is why.
As much as I have a motivation to find it to be true, it can be equally true that you have a motivation to find it not to be true.
My motivation to find it not true. My wife is a born-again believer.
Mm-hmm.
I have all the motivation in the world to believe that this is true. I really do. I have 2 kids. You realize how much easier my life would be if I could convince myself this is true?
Sure.
It would be. I have motivation to believe this is true. I really do.
And I don't have motivation to be skeptical of evidence and try to figure things out.
Okay, but we
see, this is where it seems a bit unfair, Doug. You want to say you have motivation to want to believe that it's true, but I don't have motivation to want to find the truth. Well, it seems to me that you're kind of putting an unfair double standard here. You're expected to have impeccable. You're expecting me to believe.
Okay, tell me.
Motives.
Tell me your motivation. I just told you my motivation to believe it's true. Tell me your motivation why it might be false.
What do you mean? You told me it's motivation. I'm not understanding what you're saying. What are you saying?
You're saying it's a double-edged sword. You're saying that it slices both ways. I agreed with you. And you basically said that on the last live stream, when I brought up your experience that you had, you were saying, I was saying that could taint your way you view the evidence. You turned that back on me just now. And you said, well, maybe the same is true for you, Doug. Maybe you have motivations to believe it's not true. And I said, maybe, but I do have motivation to believe it's true. And I gave you the story of my wife. Now, so there's my motivation to believe that it's true. Mm-hmm. Now I'm asking you, what is your motivation to believe it's not?
Jesus' claims are incredibly difficult to live out. I fail them all the time. I wish I could tell you personal stories that weren't going to get broadcast over the entire internet to the destruction of my family. I adopted 8 children because my wife and I believe that God has adopted us into his family, so we have an obligation to adopt them into ours. We adopted 5 children who'd been in the foster care system for 6 years. If you think that's easy, it's incredibly not easy.
But Jesus doesn't need your works. He doesn't need you to do X, Y, and Z perfectly. It's about grace, isn't it?
I'm not going to go down that road. But let me just say, Jesus makes claims in our life. It would have been incredibly easier for me to just, what I wanted to be? What I wanted to be was a high school history teacher. That's what I wanted to be. That was my goal in life. I wanted to be a high school history teacher. I love my high school history teacher. I thought he was great. That's what I wanted to do with my life. The claims of Jesus upon my life meant I went a different direction, and I live my life in a different way.
Yeah,
I have to love
but again,
my
you're assuming that the claims of Jesus are actually the claims of Jesus.
Well, once again, you just asked me what my motivation is for me to lie. And I'm telling you, this is extremely
No, not to lie. I'm not asking your motivation to lie. I'm asking your motivation to consider the possibility. Why would you even consider that it's not true? And I'll tell you what my answer would be from the perspective of when I was a believer. If you would have asked me that question 10 years ago, Doug, what is your motivation to being skeptical about all this, or to consider the possibility that it's actually false? My answer would have been, because I value truth. And if it's true that these claims are bogus, I want to know it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I want to believe what's true. And I don't want to be duped. I don't want to be fooled. And I'm not going to say, well, just because Christianity is the biggest religion in the world and the Bible has all these transcripts and all these other things, that automatically makes it true. No, it doesn't. It does not. And so this is why, in a nutshell, I think that when you have a big claim that affects your life, you better have big evidence to back it up. And
Yeah.
notice what I did there. I didn't use the word extraordinary.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
So that is why I'm not a Christian, in a nutshell. And I'm trying to figure out why it is that you guys like you and me are so different. Why is it that I will question these things and lower my confidence, whereas you see the same things I do and your confidence stays sky high? And the only thing I can figure out, and this is where you can correct me if I'm wrong, it's because I have talked to so many people who's had so many powerful experiences, and I get it, I understand it. If I saw visions, like I've heard some stories, I don't know. My guess is I would be so hesitant to change my mind. I talked to, well, I didn't talk to her, but in Twitter, a woman who claims that Mother Mary sat right next to her on her bed, the devil pinned her to her bed, and she was paralyzed, and that she saw Jesus just like we seen each other. If she saw all those three things, I can understand why she's so confident. But there's a lot of confident people in this world who are wrong. There's a lot of sincere people in this world who are wrong. I don't want to be one of them. So that's why I value truth so much. That's why I ask these questions. That's why I have my YouTube channel.
Great. I think that's very commendable that you want to search for the truth.
Where do we go from here, Mike?
Well, there's a lot I could say in response to that, but we live in a real digital age, and the people down there can say some pretty crazy stuff. Here would be my question: What would make you question the closedness of the universe?
The what? The closedness?
Closedness of the universe.
You're assuming I believe in the closedness in the universe.
Okay. Well, you told me that you heard of a person who said they were pinned down on their bed and they were held there by demons, and Jesus came and saved them.
Yeah.
Okay.
It actually happened to me too.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't believe that in hindsight that was the devil pinning me, but that similar experience happened to me.
Okay. Obviously, you believe the world is closed. There are no such things as demons. There's no such thing as God. There are no such things as supernatural entities. Yeah. There are no such things as miracles.
No, that's not true. And this is like we're back to square one.
Okay, well, help me understand what you're talking about then. You don't believe in a closed world.
I'm a fallible human being. I could be wrong. Okay.
Okay.
I don't believe a demon pinned me to my bed 20 years ago.
Okay. Because
now looking back in hindsight, that's an extraordinary claim that I said to myself. And looking back, I was 19 years old.
Sure.
I was sleep deprived. I was in the middle of exams. I just had a girlfriend who hormones were raging. I could come up with so many combinations of explanations that are not extraordinary. So my confidence is lowered now that it actually happened. But
how many? I mean, have you ever been to the Eiffel Tower?
No. Oh, in Vegas I did.
I'm sorry?
In Vegas I did.
In Vegas you did. That's a really big thing. How do you know those things aren't photoshopped?
How do I know that pictures of the Eiffel Tower are not photoshopped?
It's a very simple question.
I don't. How's that for an answer?
Why do you believe in the Eiffel Tower?
Why do I believe in that? Because we have more than just pictures.
What do you mean? How many people have you personally spoken to who have been to the Eiffel Tower?
Personally,
face to face.
One.
One.
No, two.
So, two. You have
Yeah.
two people that you have personally spoke to.
So let's write this down. This is good. I like that you're doing this. So we have
that are eyewitnesses of the Eiffel Tower to you.
Remember, you did this with the head cutting off, and it didn't work out well for you. Now we're going to do it with the Eiffel Tower.
You think it didn't work out for me?
No,
I don't think it's like
because
that.
I quickly listed three different types of evidences that we don't have for Jesus.
Yeah, and you assumed that you'd be able to preserve them for 500 years based on zero evidence.
So we have.
I can make up things too.
So we now have picture
There's
evidence.
a special spaghetti monster in the sky, and he will swoop down and pick up your blood and preserve it in the big ice cooler. I mean, you can say anything you want to say.
So Eiffel Tower, I have two eyewitnesses. I have pictures. I have video.
But how do you know those aren't? How do you know those pictures have not been photoshopped?
I have video from multiple sources.
But how do you know they haven't been photoshopped?
What else do we have? My guess is we could probably even get. Well, we probably couldn't take a piece of the Eiffel Tower off.
You're trying to prove to yourself that the Eiffel Tower exists. If you're really going to be a skeptic, I mean a real skeptic, you have to really question everything, not just things that you find extraordinary.
Okay, again, I'm going to ask you again, what do you predict I'm going to say to that?
You don't think it's relevant.
Why don't I think it's relevant?
Because I don't know that one.
And then you didn't know it before when I asked you. It's because is the Eiffel Tower an extraordinary claim? Its existence.
So in other words, just so I can wrap this up, because the Eiffel Tower isn't making claims about your eternal soul, you can readily believe in it.
Not readily. I still have evidence. I mentioned 3 or 4 of them here.
You have 2 eyewitnesses.
I have pictures, and
that's actually less eyewitnesses, or at least the same eyewitnesses that we're talking about Jesus.
Well, I have. You asked me personally, but
Yeah, I'm asking you personally. Who have you talked to?
Anybody in chat? Have you seen the Eiffel Tower? We got 23 people watching. If you've been there,
No, that's not face to face. Anyone can say anything. Anyone can say anything over the internet. I can get on here and type and say, I've seen the Eiffel Tower. That doesn't mean you've seen the Eiffel Tower.
What did you just say?
2 people.
What did you just said that anybody can say that they saw the Eiffel Tower, but that doesn't mean they saw the Eiffel Tower?
Sure.
Would you say that about the Gospels?
Sure. We're in full-on skeptic mode now.
Okay. So
we're in full-on skeptic mode. Sure.
Okay, so now if you're willing to go there with the Gospels, why are you so confident?
No, wait a minute. We're not done with you yet. You don't get to just run this thing over here, okay?
Okay.
You have 2 eyewitnesses to the Eiffel Tower that you've spoken to face. You've not spoken to anyone else who's face-to-face seen the Eiffel Tower. Now, how do you know they actually went to the Eiffel Tower?
How do I know that?
How do you know they weren't lying to you?
They could have been.
They could have been.
Yes.
So in other words, you're telling me that you believed 2 people who told you that they've seen the Eiffel Tower face-to-face.
Yes.
And you went with what they told you.
Yes.
And some potentially photoshopped pictures.
Yes.
And potentially photoshopped news coverages.
Yes.
And potentially fraudulent movies that have been framed there.
Yes.
You believed 2 people who you don't have any verification. You have no verification that they saw the Eiffel Tower.
I wouldn't say that, but yes. I'm going to say yes to
Why are you lowering your confidence in your knowledge of the Eiffel Tower? Why are you selectively skeptical? You're selectively skeptical. You don't apply this to anything else. This is skepticism being fully applied to you. This is what real skepticism looks like.
I'll answer your question.
Real questions to everything.
The reason why
Descartes did. How do you know you're not living in a dream?
The reason why I'm not lowering my confidence is because the evidence I have listed matches the claim.
What do you mean matches the claim?
The claim is, does the Eiffel Tower exist? Correct?
No, the claim is you believe you have good cause to believe in the Eiffel Tower.
The claim
you believe
is
you have good cause to believe in the Eiffel Tower?
I believe, excuse me, I'm losing my voice. I believe the Eiffel Tower exists. The claim is,
on a scale of knowledge and belief, where is your confidence level in the Eiffel Tower? Is it a 10 or is it a 5? Where is your confidence level in the Eiffel Tower?
It's 9.99999999999.
Based on what?
Based on the evidence we just listed.
Two eyewitnesses. You only have 2 eyewitnesses.
Yeah. I would, you know what, Mike? I would be satisfied with 1. Even worse.
You would be satisfied with 1.
Yes.
Yes.
You know why?
Why?
Because it matches the claim.
And so, because it happens to match the claim, they happen to tell you what you already want to believe. You're willing to accept that. Golly, you're pretty trusting. Seems to me that you're pretty gullible.
Yeah,
you just believe what anyone tells you.
Yeah, Mike, I am. I guess I am, because if you told me you had a dog, I'd believe you.
Right. You believe me. You don't have any evidence that I have a dog.
But if you told me you had a fire-breathing dragon, I wouldn't. You notice the difference?
What do you think is the difference?
One's a little rarer than the other. One's a little more extraordinary than the other.
Rarer, extraordinary. Explain those words.
I've never seen a fire-breathing dragon, but I've seen many dogs.
You've never seen the Eiffel Tower.
I've never known someone who's seen a fire-breathing dragon. I've never seen even.
You don't think I can find something that you haven't seen in the world? Did you go to the pyramids? You ever seen the pyramids in Egypt?
Has anybody else seen the pyramids? Has anybody else seen the fire-breathing dragon? Now,
if we're my point here, Doug, is if we're going to be skeptical, you have to apply the skepticism all the way across the board. And there comes a point where you can get to the point of irrational skepticism. It is a possibility.
Is it irrational? Do you believe it's irrational for me to believe in the Eiffel Tower, that it exists, based on 2 eyewitnesses?
No, not at all.
Okay.
But the skepticism card.
Hang on. Why?
You can play this game literally with anything, and that's what you're missing here, Doug. The game that you're playing, skepticism, it can go to anything. This is what Descartes was talking about. This is what Hume talked about. Is that this skepticism you can apply it to anything,
Mike,
and destroy anything. The question isn't, can you apply skepticism? The question is your skepticism warranted?
Okay, great question. Is my skepticism warranted if you told me you had a fire-breathing dragon?
Actually, I would like to ask the next question. And I would say, considering, I'm just not going to answer your question.
Why not?
Because I don't want to. And you don't get to run conversations. We're in a conversation together. So here would be my question.
Mike, remember what we agreed to? Mike?
Never done any historical research of any type, of any kind. And we're talking about historical research and how to understand it and how to apply it. Based upon the fact that you've never done that, what is the good cause for you to look at me and to think that I have not done my due diligence when it comes to history?
Okay, now, this is my perception of it right now, that you're getting defensive.
Okay.
Because nowhere have I said tonight that you're not doing your due diligence.
Well, see, Doug, when you talk about you have good cause, you are a truth seeker, and you make sure you tell your truth seeker part after I talk about what I spoke of, why I could not be a Christian. We're in equal boats here, okay? You are a person who I believe has, in every good conscience, done the work that you've done. I don't know why you wouldn't afford me the same courtesy. Mike, I believe you've done the due diligence that you have done.
Mike, I believe you've done the due diligence that you've done.
Great. I appreciate that. Thank you. So now we come back to the idea. Now, how does an atheist and how does a Christian communicate to one another? We're both authentic people who have investigated our positions, and we've done our due diligence, and we've done our research, and now how do we have communications with one another? How do we talk with one another? What's a fair way for us to have a communication?
Well, I think we are sort of doing it right now.
I do. I think so. But part of this, I think, goes back to some of the things that we've had conversations of before. And how do we work our way forward here? Personally, I believe that speaking to one another in communication is preferable to shooting guns at each other.
Yeah. Do you feel I'm shooting guns at you?
No, you're not shooting guns. What we're doing is great here. What I'm meaning is that dialogue is really important, and we have to be able to really dialogue from an honest position. So I think that begins with recognizing that we're both people who are truth-seeking, and we're both people who are trying to find the truth, and then we try to find common ground that we can agree on and move forward.
I have, I don't know if you've watched the video where when I'm truth-seeking, I've been asked this question many times before: what would it take for me to believe in Jesus? That he rose from the dead and that he's my savior.
Yeah.
And it's something that my friend Billy said, all these 2,000-year-old evidences is one thing, but what has Jesus done lately? So I think for me, what it would take is these experiences that seems like everybody in the world has had, but me.
Well, actually, you just said that you did have one.
Let me tell you the type of experience that I think. You know how you said earlier that these skeptics, they always want more and more and more. Mm-hmm. Here's what more and more and more means to me. It means seeing my sister who's paralyzed from MS. She can only move her eyes and her mouth.
I'm sorry.
She's lost a lot of muscle mass. If you were to come into her hospital room, pray for her in the name of Jesus, she gained 50 pounds of muscle mass and jumped up and hopped around. I tell you, my confidence would probably go as high as yours. Mm-hmm. Have I ever seen anything even close to that? I've seen people get their legs extended in TV evangelist type episodes, or, back pain gone, or some people have claimed the cancer is gone and all these things. But I'm talking about something that,
that personally affects your life.
Yeah. Number one, it's personal, because mm-hmm. I know my sister. I know her situation. It's personal. And number two, it's very demonstrable. It's very, to actually put 50 pounds back on the human body. And MS is probably one of the worst diseases as far as you can't fake that stuff.
Right.
So that's what it would do for me. Now, that being said, what would lower your confidence? This is what the question I asked you earlier. I just told you what would raise my confidence. What would lower yours?
I think I mentioned this before. If it could be demonstrated that Jesus was a liar.
What if it could be demonstrated that he never made the claim to begin with? Would that work? Like, why go to the liar part? Why not just go that he never made the claim?
I suppose if that could be reasonably demonstrated, I suppose.
Okay, so we made progress. We each know what the other person...
So let me get this straight. Your sister lying on the bed where she's at with MS, mm-hmm. and you have to demonstrate to me that Jesus never made the claims that he did.
Yeah, and what I would add to that, just to let you know, I don't need 100% confidence to believe something. There's many things that I think both of you and I believe.
Can I ask you a question that's personal?
Sure.
Did your sister's MS have any role to play in?
No, it happened after.
I'm just curious.
Yeah. No, it's a fair question. I rack my brain over and over again. My cousin and I, we think about this greatly. what actually was the impetus for me to leave Christianity? And so we're thinking like, was it my sister? No, that happened after. Did someone in the church hurt you? No, I would think a smart enough guy to realize there's bad apples in every belief system. I'm not going to hold Jesus responsible for Christians, what they do. So it wasn't anything like that. It was just asking myself the questions I'm asking you tonight.
Yeah. Right. I can see that.
Yeah.
Interesting. I think a lot of people have this need that God will, in many ways, fix their problems or demonstrate to them personally, to show them that he exists or that he's there, or whatever way you want to phrase it. I think a lot of people have.
I actually think people are more likely to believe in Jesus or any other religion if they do have lots of problems.
Yeah.
I actually think if Jesus is real and died for my sins, I'm in a screwed up situation because I'm a pretty smart, successful guy. I'm relatively healthy. I just put together a video tonight of four main apologists in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
And I got their testimonies together off the internet, and I put them together. And you know how similar they are? They were. One was an alcoholic. One was a drug addict. Two were drug addicts. Two were suicidal. It's like they have these stories of how terrible and how bad and how sinful they were. In the common sense of all the bad things they did. I know you believe we're all sinful, but I don't have that story. I don't have to pray to pay my electric bill. I don't have to pray to, you name it. It's like, and my expectations in life are pretty low. Like when bad things happen to me, I kind of expect bad things to happen. I realize that life's not fair. I kind of laugh at people who get freaked out, like these social justice warriors who have these tantrums when things don't go their way. And it's like,
I agree with you.
Yeah, and it's like, expect life not to go your way. That's life. And so when it does go your way, you're happy. And when it doesn't go your way, you kind of expected it and you kind of work through it. You have safeguards and stuff. So I'm telling you all this to let you know that, and my wife, this is what, I'm going to ask you what I asked my wife. Why do I need Jesus?
What's really interesting about that is that is almost exactly what the majority of upper class Jews would have said in their day. Is
but what's the answer?
I'm sorry?
But what's the answer?
Why do you need Jesus? Well, you don't.
Okay.
I
appreciate
you've
that.
answered it in your own words, is that you've said your life is sufficient. I have no cause to disagree with you. You are, if I ask you to take me sincerely in my belief, then I have to take you sincerely in yours. You have to say that your life is satisfied and that you're happy with where you're at and that you are fine with where you're living. I have to take you at that. And so I would say you simply don't need Jesus. And for me to try to convince you as to why you need some kind of eternal hell as the punishment, I think that what pales in comparison is the loss of truth, not necessarily the hell, quote unquote, that you could be thrown into, quote unquote, at the end of time.
Do you believe in hell?
Yes, I do. If I believe that choices matter, if I believe that we are free will creatures, then there has to be.
And I know many people have different takes on hell. What can you in 30 seconds tell me your take on hell?
Well, you've given me a great illustration. I mean, you don't need Jesus.
Okay, so it's for you. It's hell is a separation from God.
I mean, you've said it yourself. You've decided that you are completely sufficient on your own. Why would God interject himself into that and demand that you take him?
Okay, so you don't believe in the actual suffering part, and
Oh, no, I think that's just inherent in what it is that you're giving up. A person who says, I don't think I need oxygen, can say that they don't need oxygen and burn off all the oxygen in their room. When their lungs burn up because they don't have oxygen, or the fire goes into their lungs and burns it up, it's not a consequence of someone trying to harm you. It's the consequences of what happens when you burn off oxygen.
okay, so you're saying that by me not believing, I'm harming myself both on Earth, or are you saying after I die?
Yes. There is a I can't think of who's C.S. Lewis, who said that for believers, as they die, they go into eternity, and then they look back and realize that heaven was actually long before they had ever died. And for unbelievers, this is Lewis, and for unbelievers, hell started long before they reached the fire. Now, his idea behind that is that our lives have a trajectory, that our lives are shooting in a general direction. And that direction is either towards eternity, acknowledging who God is and living as a creature under God, or living as if you are God. And I don't mean you as in you personally, Doug. I mean you as in humanity, the person who thinks he's God.
Okay, so but do you believe in the eternal torment of hell after death?
As if God has a blowtorch and he turns it up hotter?
Yeah, like fire, gnashing of teeth.
I think it's more like you've burned off all the oxygen to prove that you don't need it.
But is it going to be uncomfortable after I die in your belief system? Am I going to be in discomfort?
You have to recognize what it is that I'm saying, okay? All good comes from God. So when you have sex with your wife and you experience the pleasure of an orgasm with your wife, that pleasure that you experience, not the orgasm is a physiological thing. The pleasure, the joy that you experience is a gift. It comes from God. It's God's, what we call prevenient grace. So when a person has said they no longer want to participate in that, they no longer want a part of that. Did you see the Dead Man, A Curse of the Black Pearl, Pirates of the Caribbean?
No.
Well, there's a line in there where they have just lost all taste. They've lost all feeling. They've lost everything. It's just numb. And after a while, it becomes for them unsufferable. If God, and remember, I'm not saying that God's throwing you in some kind of pit. If God is the source of all good, and he is giving you a gift of experiencing joy, it's a gift. It's just a free gift. Your experience of joy.
Okay, I want you to be totally honest with me. I want you to be totally honest with me.
I am being honest with you.
I mean, what I'm about to ask. Don't think you can hurt my feelings. Just tell me the way it is. I want the truth from your belief system.
Yeah.
Do you think because I don't have Jesus in my life that I am not as good a father as I could be if I did?
As a Christian, I'd have to say, I have to acknowledge yes, because the Father is God. And if we don't recognize that we have a role to our children.
Okay, I appreciate that. So that's one thing you could have said to me when I asked you the question earlier, why should I believe in Jesus? You could have said, well, I believe it would make you a better father.
Yeah, but we're not going to agree on that.
No, we're not, but that's okay. But I want the honest truth. Another thing, by correlation or by extension, what I'm hearing you say is that if I believe in Jesus, I'd be a better husband.
The potentiality is there. Yes, some people are. If you're seeking Christ, if you're seeking the heart of God, then yes. um, I think we're getting to the point now where we're talking about what does it mean to believe, and this is where we're beginning to have some differentiation. I think for you, belief is a form of content.
Yeah, sorry, I mean a follower, a true follower of Christ. I'm not just
Well, let
talking
me
about
ask you
belief.
this:
Yeah.
you've read the Gospels.
Mm-hmm.
If you put Jesus's teaching into practice in every part of your life, do you think you'd be a better father?
No.
Because?
First of all, Jesus said himself that you should run away from your father and follow him. He had no concept of thrift. He was apocalyptic. Though Jesus described in the Gospels was apocalyptic. If I took Jesus's words at face value without interpretation.
Oh, okay. I hear what you're saying then. That makes sense.
I should not save up for my kid's future. I should not. In fact, as soon as my kid's 18, I should say, you know what? I got to do the Lord's work. You go do your own thing. If we happen to run into each other, fine. But I got more important things to do.
Yeah. You don't think you're interpreting there?
Well, I don't want to get into the exegesis of the scripture, but
well, I mean, you just said without doing interpretation. I mean, what it sounds like to me is you're interpreting.
I'm paraphrasing. I believe I'm paraphrasing what Jesus actually said, not what he meant, but what he said, from your worldview.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you this question: when you look at the ancient Jewish teachers, and you look at how they understood Scripture, you look at how they taught Scripture. Do you think they spoke about Scripture the same way you and I speak about Scripture?
No, and this what we're talking about now doesn't interest me, because what we were talking about is, why should I become a Christian? And you said, well, you don't need to. I can't think of a reason why you should be a Christian. But when pressed, you admitted I should be a Christian because, number one, I could be potentially a better father and a better husband. Now, if what you're saying is true, these, in my opinion, are good reasons. If you are right, I need to rethink things, because I do want to be a better father. I do want to be a better husband.
Here's the thing, Doug. When I try to press home a point that I believe I am right on, and I'm trying to make a point on, you dig your heels in and don't want to have anything to do with it. And then when you can trick me into giving you criteria, then you say to yourself, golly, if you would just present this to me, then you can do these kind of things. I mean, if we're going to have an authentic dialogue, I think it has to begin with authenticity. This doesn't feel like you're really wanting to know really where I'm at. It feels like, and I'm not saying you're doing this, Doug, I'm saying what it feels like. It feels like this is a aha gotcha moment again, where we go back to the whole dragon and the sandals.
Yeah, I can see how you think that, and I apologize. It is an aha moment.
Yeah.
But in my defense, when I ask you a question, you have permission to be brutally honest with me.
Yeah.
And this is why I think I kind of did that aha gotcha thing with you just now, because I've been around Christians long enough that I'm just going to say it. I didn't believe you when you said, no, you don't need Jesus. When you said it the first time, I did not believe you. And so that's why I took you down this rabbit trail, to show you.
Right. You wanted to show me how I was wrong.
No, I wanted to show you that you weren't being honest with me.
Well, maybe there's another way of looking at it. Maybe there's a way of looking at this that's talking about two people who are in a conversation together.
Okay.
And I'm not going to call you a liar to your face, even though I may disagree with you. I'm not going to call you a liar to your face and tell you that you don't really understand the deepest needs of your heart, mainly because that's kind of rude.
But why did you not say to me when I asked you, why do I need Jesus? You had the option right there in front of you. And a lot of Christians have taken this option, but you chose not to. You could have said, you need Jesus because, number one, if you don't have him, you're going to go to hell. But you chose not to say that.
That's right.
But yet you believe that. Number two, you could have said, because I believe, and you could have couched it. You could have said, I could be wrong, but this is what I believe. If you accept Jesus, I believe you'd be a better father, a better husband.
Mm-hmm.
You could have gone down a list of options, but
Yes.
instead, why did you say you don't?
Truth be told,
Yeah.
because I knew you wanted me to go down that road. You were expecting me to say something about your life isn't sufficient because your life isn't. I mean, I heard the conversation in my head prior to me giving you the conversation. Based on the conversation that we've had so far, I played out the conversation.
Wait a minute. Now who's doing the gotcha?
No, I'm just saying I didn't do it. I just didn't do it.
You just
I didn't follow you down the road. I just decided not to. I mean, did you really think I couldn't see what you were doing, Mike?
Okay, wait. But why?
I think I don't need Jesus. Did you really think I didn't understand what you were doing? I just decided not to follow you down that path.
Why?
Those things? Yeah. But there's a couple reasons. One, I don't have to beat you in the head with hell to talk about Jesus. Number two, it doesn't build a relationship to tell you how you're wrong and going to burn in hell when you've known all of these things your whole life. You grew up in the church. Number three, this is in some ways a chess conversation where we're moving pieces on a board, and not taking a baited bishop is in some way setting up an unexpected play out. You baited your bishop out there. You hung it out there. You dangled me and dared me to take it. I chose not to. Why? This is how if I sit down and talk with real people who aren't broadcasting this all over the internet, I just have conversations with people. Just talk to them. What are your deepest needs? What's going on in your life? What do you believe about the world? I don't actually sit down and debate these kind of things. I'll sit down and talk to people about what I know, but that's not where you're at. That's not what you want to do. So I'm willing to do this. I enjoy these kind of conversations. But
wait a minute. Are you saying you when I asked you why do I need Jesus and you said you don't, the whole purpose was that to steer me into a different direction?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you say you don't need Jesus. If I were sitting down and talking to another person, real person, just talking, and they said, tell me why I say I don't need Jesus in my life. You told me, you just said I don't need Jesus in my life. You give me a reason. This is baiting me up to get into a fighting match that says I'm not going to win.
No. I even told you just before I asked you that I asked this of my own wife. Yeah. And it wasn't to beat her up. She knows me well.
Doug, if you think your life is exactly the way you want it, and that you don't think that Jesus had something profound to give to humanity, if you don't think that there is a God in heaven that you're going to have to answer to one day, and that you are perfectly fine with everywhere you're at, I'm not going to be able to throw out a litany of things that are going to be able to convince you of the wrongness of your own belief.
I'm the first to admit. No, hang on, Mike. I'm the first to admit that my life's not perfect. But my question to you is, why do I need Jesus?
It's perfect enough for you, right?
No. The question is, why do I need Jesus? Let's say there's something wrong with my life, okay? Let's say, I don't know. I'm not addicted to anything. Well, I am addicted to nicotine gum. So let's use that example.
You told me that last time. That was a good comment.
So, and let's say I really want to get off this because I think it's bad for my health, even though I've done the research and I don't think it is. Why do I need Jesus to get off nicotine gum as opposed to another method? Why do I need Jesus to help me be a better father or a better husband? That's why I was asking you. Because
I think you have a conception of what I perceive Jesus as. I don't think we're perceiving his claims in the same way. That Jesus has not come to just make us a little bit happier people. That's not what the Christian claim is. That's not what Jesus was claiming. Jesus claimed to be a king.
So what's the purpose of Jesus, in your opinion? What's his purpose for coming to earth?
It is righting the wrongs of the world. It's setting the world back on track towards the proper relationship with God.
And
which, for me, remember, this is where I'm coming from. Where I'm coming from is the proper relationship with God recognizes there's a God. I'm not him. He should be God. I should be the creature. And I think 99% of the problems that humanity has is we think we should be God and that he should do what we want.
Okay, yeah, I can see that, and I can understand that perspective. But the whole point of the question, why do I need Jesus, is it seems to me like whether you're a Christian or a non-Christian, people are not that much different. So, and I get the typical answer of, well, they're not maturing in their Christian walk, or they're not. Yes, Doug, you're right that there's a lot of Christians who are not doing what they should be doing, or not believing what they should be believing, or not doing their quiet times, or whatever. But it seems to me like if this Jesus thing is real, you should see a difference. Would you agree with that?
I think so. Matter of fact, I believe that thoroughly. I think there should be a difference. If I could, I give us a couple thoughts that I think you can think about whether or not you think they're true. I think there's a part of the problem is that we have a belief about Christianity that it's a religion. And so religions are supposed to do and accomplish certain things. And because Christianity is a religion, it fits in a very specific box. Basically, it has something to do with I cognitively believe these things to be true. I would be interested in reading to you some of Diogenes the Areopagite, who talked about what Christians were doing in the ancient world. And I'd say I think. I mean, how many Christians are you talking about here, Doug? Are you saying that you've never met a Christian who went? Man, that guy really seems to have something.
I've probably known, I'm 46 years old. I probably have known literally between 1,000 and 2,000 Christians in my life.
Okay.
I can count on one hand who at the time when I was a believer even, would say, these people are different. Mm-hmm. Seriously, one hand.
Mm-hmm. What did they do?
But looking back now, I would say even if they weren't Christians, if they became atheists, they would still be different. They were just those types of people who are just amazing, compassion, kindness, loving, all the characteristics you would imagine would be associated with the Jesus of the New Testament.
Who you just a few moments ago said didn't have anything that you wanted to follow. I'm not trying to be gotcha. I'm trying to point out that I think there is something in Jesus that you look at and you admire.
Yeah, but what my point is that these concepts of love, kindness, all these things, they are associated with Jesus. I'm not denying that. But my point is, with these few handful that I could think of out of the thousands, I don't know if you heard me when I said this, but I think you even take away their belief, they would still be that way.
I heard you.
Yeah. So that tells me that, is it really Jesus or the Holy Spirit making people to do these things or act this way, or is it something else?
And you chose to be skeptical of their proclamation. I mean, you've never met anybody who.
No, it's like everything we're talking about now is like almost an aside, because I don't believe in the core propositions of the gospel. So I don't. it's almost like I'm talking in terms of your worldview right now, and also where I've come from. Because I would never have said what I'm saying. When I was a Christian, I probably would not have said this part of that they wouldn't be any different if they became atheists. I think at that time, like 15 years ago, I would have said, yeah, they probably would start doing bad stuff. But I've met, and you probably met a lot of people who are not Christians, who you look at them and you say, you know what? These Christians couldn't hold a dime to these other people. Like they are, if you were to just put a list of things that are great and wonderful and loving and kind and compassionate, these non-Christians outdo these Christians 9 times out of 10. I hope you've met people like that. I have. And so if I can't believe in Jesus because of the core propositions, I just don't believe him, I'm actually thinking, okay, give me a reason practically that I could believe it. I mean, to help my day-to-day life. And I'm not even seeing that. Like, if I could even force myself to believe, which I don't think you can, I don't even see any practical utilitarian use for it. I don't see Christians being any better at marriages than non-Christians. Do you? Do you?
I hear what you're saying.
Divorce rates, depression in this country seems like it's Mormon women in Utah. If you look at one study I saw, it's like, I actually think in a lot of ways Christianity hurts people psychologically.
Sure.
Like when you start believing in demons and angels in your room at night.
Sure. Yeah.
Now you're being a little sarcastic to me right now. Have I said something to offend?
Oh, I'm not offended.
Or what else is going on? What did I say?
Well, I think there's an element. You're familiar with the frog in the pot analogy?
You slowly crank up the heat.
Slowly turn up the heat, yeah. And you just don't recognize because the frog doesn't recognize the context that it's in.
Right.
What needs to happen is I think you take for basic granted the idea that we're living in a Western culture that's been essentially shaped from the ground up by the Catholic Church and Christianity in general. America in specific was shaped very much on Puritan values. And until recently, basically everybody believed and followed those values until the last, I don't know, maybe 50 years. Starting in the 1960s, I think you can say there's been a serious change since then. And so you believe, for example, that love or mercy, for example, you believe that mercy is a virtue. Aristotle didn't. They considered it a vice. And that people who were in poor, desperate situations, they deserved it. Slaves deserved their lot because that was who they were. And it's not I don't know how else to say this without sounding, once again, condescending. But I think you just need to uproot yourself and go live in a foreign country for about 10 years and then come back to America and come back to Western culture and then and see how Muslims treat women.
I agree with you there. Like, that's horrible.
People can complain about how, patriarchy or whatever, but the bottom line is nobody was stringing up women in the 1920s when they were demanding free equality. Why do women have rights?
They were stringing up blacks though when in slavery.
They were. They were absolutely. And I think it's a bit simplistic to say that stems from Christianity. I think it stemmed from a very specific view that came out of the 17th century. There are Ethiopian Christians who are black and have been black for 2,000 years, and they're Christians. There are Arabic Christians in the Middle East who are not white, who were Christians for the last 2,000.
So what I'm hearing you say is that Western culture is, I'll just say, better than some.
No. I think you're taking simply for granted the values that we have, and proclaiming them as just kind of seeming to come out of nowhere, not recognizing the church's role in framing and structuring society.
Oh yeah, okay.
Giving us the idea that mercy is a good thing, that women should be treated with respect and dignity.
Okay. I understand what you're saying. So
and that's not to say that I disagree with you. It's to say that I think you're talking about looking at evidences and you're talking about doing these, but you're painting in an incredibly broad brush that is not that most historians would simply not agree with you with, Doug.
What part exactly?
Well, that the assumption that the values that we have don't come from Christianity, that the things that we would hold dear don't come from the Christian worldview. The idea of tolerance. I mean, where does the idea of tolerance come from?
Okay, now this is very notion. I hear what you're saying. But in my own life, and maybe this is why I'm biased, in my own life, I didn't see a transition to the negative after I left Christianity. In fact, in a lot of ways,
sure,
you can talk to people who've known me before and after, and they would say I've improved. Now, maybe they're biased too, but so I can extrapolate that. Maybe it's wrong of me to do so, but I can imagine what would the United States look like if we woke up tomorrow morning and everyone were atheists, no longer believed. And is your expectation that the morality would go down, that there would be chaos, that there would be...
I think it depends on what you mean by the word morality.
Do you think there would be more killing, more raping, more stealing?
Humanity has been doing these things for a long time. You seem to think that killing, stealing, and raping are wrong. Based on what? Where do you get that idea from?
Mike.
No, I mean this. I mean, I'm not trying to play gotcha here. I really don't. I'm really not trying to play.
No. I sighed because you deflected.
Okay.
I asked you a question, and it's. I think it's an expectations question. So there's no wrong or right answers. I'm asking, what would you expect the United States to look like if we woke up tomorrow morning and everyone who lived in the United States became an atheist?
Have you read "Thus Spoke Zarathustra"? I can never say it right. "Thus Spoke Zarathustra" by Friedrich Nietzsche?
No.
Okay. Friedrich Nietzsche was an atheist, and I think he saw very clearly what a godless morality, what godless life meant. I think he saw it incredibly
So is your answer
clear.
Yes?
So my answer is, I don't even think we could define what we're talking about if we're talking about an atheist worldview. I think you have to presume a lot of things and borrow from other people. I don't think atheism has the tools to be able to do it on its own. It just doesn't.
See, Mike, this is where some people in the comments are going to attack you because I just asked you, I think, a simple expectations question.
And I said, and I'm telling you, yes, I think it would, but I don't think we even have the language to describe it because atheism does not have the intellectual tools to be able to give us what we need to rationally. Now, I'm not talking about emotionally. I'm talking about rationally talk about good and evil. When you have people like Richard Dawkins, who says that good and evil are simply cultural constructs, that these are not things that are found in reality, good luck trying to build an ethical moral system when you don't have a concept that good and evil are even possible entities that exist.
So I'm going to assume some stuff about you, and you tell me if I'm wrong just to save time. But
Sure.
I'm going to assume that you believe that morality comes from God. He's his nature. He is the foundation. He's the standard. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Remember, I'm coming at it from a Christian, so I'm not going to deny. I would say that there's what's called a God-shaped hole inside of us.
Okay.
I'm sure you've heard that.
Okay, so
Pascal.
that's your standard morality. So let's say you're right about that, all of it. How do you know what that objective morality is, the epistemology of it?
Oh, you don't. That's why we have discussions. That's why we have conversations.
So it's just theoretical.
No. We believe, as Christians, we believe that good is real. And that when we're talking about seeking the good, that we're not talking about a language game. We're not talking about a cultural perception. We're not talking about the ways that we perceive the world. We think we're talking about something real.
But let's get practical here.
This is practical. If you don't know the good, should I push my grandmother down the stairs, or should I help her across the street? If you can't look at those two and tell me which one is good and which one is not good, you can't even have a conversation about ethics.
Yeah, I agree. If that's all the information I had, it's an easy no-brainer. But you can these things called moral dilemmas.
I think it's an easy no-brainer. Why is it an easy no-brainer?
Because it's a no-brainer in your worldview, and it's a no-brainer in mine because I view objective morality differently than you, but in the sense of comparisons to well-being and unnecessary suffering. So, but do we really want to talk about morality at 1:24 a.m.?
You're the one who asked me if I thought the world would be better, and I want to make sure I'm clarifying this. So
okay.
let me hear. I want to be clear because I don't want down there to be spewing venom.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that atheists cannot act and behave towards the good. It's not what I'm saying. Okay. A lot of people think that what we mean when we talk about goodness comes from God, and that therefore, because an atheist is cut off from God, therefore they cannot behave in a good manner. Remember what I talked about?
Okay, I got you. Let me summarize. You're basically saying that you can be an atheist and do good, but it all basically stems from God. I get that.
Okay, but when I say that atheism as an ideology is incapable of putting together a coherent ethical system, I'm not saying that atheists can't be ethical. What I'm saying is...
So how did they do that in Norway, where the majority of them are atheists? They have an ethical system.
Yes, you do not have to be rational or logical to be able to come up with an ethical system. It doesn't have to be rational.
You're going to get a lot of angry Norwegians at you right now because you just called them non-rational.
I did not call them irrational. How much of what is good and evil is left over? And this is thus spoke Zarathustra, right out of Nietzsche. How much of that is left over from their residual Lutheranism taught them?
That's a good question, but
that's a great question. That's what Nietzsche said. You're just surviving off of basically what he called pathetic slave morality. They didn't have the will to power to rise up and recognize their force and their ability and take what was theirs. They were trying to live under slave morality. Now, that's not my argument. But that's Nietzsche's.
Okay, but what about cultures or areas of the world that have minimal impact from Christianity, like let's say...
Okay. Once again, you're not hearing me, okay? I'm not saying that they have to have a coherent belief system. People are inherently moral. We know good and evil in a way that is like, I don't doubt that atheists know good and evil. That's a word that no one comes out and goes, I don't know what you mean by evil. Of course atheists know what we mean by evil. Of course atheists know what we mean by good.
And you would say it's because of God, and I would say it's because of evolution.
You could, but I would want to press in on that. I don't think any of that is really coherent once you really start pressing on it. And what I mean is where I would say, take your skepticism and apply it towards your ethical system. This isn't about, can I possibly create an ethical system that might be able to give me good and evil if it makes sense. I'm saying, be as ruthless with your ethics as you are with New Testament criticism. Does it really mean that good exists because we've evolved that way? Our brains were not evolved to recognize good and evil.
How do you define I guess we're into the full-fledged into morality. So how do you define good?
Well, you asked me why. We don't have to go down this road. All I'm simply saying is there's a distinction, and I'm deflecting, I know, because I don't want to go down this road either. All I'm saying is that there's a distinction between people who live morally and act morally and people who I might say are irrationally being good, and the difference between someone being rationally good. There's a difference. And I'm not saying that.
What's the difference?
If I believe that my child is Satan himself and is going to burn the entire world to the ground, I believe this in my head, and I am fully completely convinced that my child is the devil and will lead the world down a horrible, horrible path. Maybe he's going to murder all of my children in the middle of the night. I'm completely convinced of that. If he falls into the lake and starts drowning, I jump in to save him and pull him out. Now, if I'm fully convinced that he is a complete danger to my family, could lead the world into terror, is it rational for me to jump into the water and save him? No, it's not rational. Not if I fully, truly believe that. But can I still do that?
Yes.
Yes, because I have an emotional attachment to him. That is not necessarily, and I have an emotional attachment to a good in the same way. So people can do what is good, but not do it for rational reasons. And equally, people can do evil, believing that what they're doing is wrong, but go ahead and do it wrong anyway. There's people who do this all the time. So there's a difference.
But how does this link to God and Jesus?
Because atheism, as an ideology, actually I won't even say atheism, natural materialism does not have the tools to talk coherently about good and evil.
And
it can talk about
who determines what's coherent and what's not?
Logic.
Okay, so you're saying atheism cannot logically...
Methodological or naturalism, mechanistic naturalism does not have the capacity to rationally and coherently come up with talking about truth. It does. Now, that doesn't mean that, say, for example, Chinese people can't. I think they can. I think, for example, people who believed in Thor could. Methodological naturalism does not have the tools to talk about good and evil. It does not have the intellectual, it doesn't have the tools. It just doesn't.
Okay, I disagree with you, but my question is...
You want to try it? I mean, we can try it.
No, my question though is, so what?
What do you mean?
Okay, you just made a claim that naturalism cannot logically explain morality.
No. Naturalism cannot provide a coherent, logical, ethical system.
Okay, so...
And that's what Samuel Harris was trying to do when he did his whole ethics thing.
There's
it fails.
There's the claim that naturalism cannot form a coherent view of ethics or something like that, is what you said?
Yeah, sure, I'll go with that.
Okay. My question is, so what?
You asked me if everyone became atheists, would our world continue down a better path or a worse path? Now, if naturalism is what everybody bought into, which is the default mode for atheism, there's very few, and there's very few atheists who are not some kind of naturalist. If everybody bought into that, and it doesn't come up with a coherent system, then people are pretty much left to their own devices.
But I thought, Kate, I'm confused because I just heard you say that you could live your life without this rational system and still be a good person. So then why do you say this, that if everybody became a naturalist or a materialist, that... Because
what you're going to live with is you're not appealing to anything greater. You're not able to give people rational reasons for why they should, say, for example, sacrifice. You're not going to be able to give them rational reasons for why people ought to do a good thing that costs them in the long run. If you can say to a person...
Why not just say because it helps them?
Well, because sometimes it doesn't.
But sometimes it does.
Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And this is the issue. If it feels good, then you can do it. Well, there are psychopaths who
No, but
do
I've personally, since I've been an atheist, I've done good things that don't feel good, but I don't understand why automatically, let's assume everything you're saying is right, that materialists cannot come up with a rational explanation or accounting for morality. So what? And you said, well, because if a society is that way.
Because that was the question you posed to me.
Yeah, right. If society all became materialist tomorrow, what I'm hearing you say is you would think society would fall apart.
No, I think it would function, but I don't think it would function very well. I don't think it would function for very long. Most societies, we're really weird, Doug. Most societies generally have some kind of grounding in a metaphysical reality somewhere. And naturalism doesn't give any kind of grounding for anything anywhere other than power. If you can do something, then you ought to do something. If you don't, unless you don't feel like doing something.
So what have you heard on the other side of the argument? Like, what is the grounding that a materialist would say they have?
Usually something akin to what you said, the wellness of the human race, although it's really unclear why I should sacrifice for the wellness of the human race, or some kind of overall personal sense of well-being. That's the best thing I've heard. And that's something that's I think that came out of Sam Harris wrote that in his, I can't think of the book right now.
Yeah, so basically I won't murder someone. Number one, I don't feel like it. I don't desire it.
Right.
Maybe this is because your God has implanted something in me not to do it.
That's what
Or another explanation is maybe how Homo sapiens have evolved is that we tend to take care of our own kind, our own tribe.
Yeah.
But we treat other tribes badly sometimes.
Yeah. Yes, we do.
And so the goal is to increase that concentric circle to include more tribes. And
this would be the thing. I agree with you, Doug. That's pretty much the naturalist idea. Here's the issue. You can say that we're preserving our tribe or preserving our people. The problem is, who says that's good?
Okay. And this is why I asked you earlier how you define good. So I would say that based on how I've defined my morality, good is that which increases well-being and decreases unnecessary suffering.
Sure.
So that's my definition. What's your definition of good?
I would say God. The character and person of God is good.
And so you've defined good using God.
Mm-hmm. Actually, God defines what is good. His character defines what is good.
His character.
You are dealing literally with 1,500 years of philosophical reasoning on this topic.
Right, I understand. So if God willed for the utmost suffering starting tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., that the whole world will be in tremendous pain for 3 hours, the whole world, you would say that's good.
Doug, what you're wishing, what God would be wishing for would go against his own nature. God's will never contradict his own nature, and his nature is loving and kind.
Okay, what if I said this? Okay, I hear what you're saying, and you're going to see where
it's like asking for a round circle or a square circle.
So what I'm hearing you say is
coherent.
Yeah, what I'm hearing you say is that God would never do that.
God cannot do that.
He cannot cause suffering for the whole world?
He cannot cause suffering that is outside of what is perfectly love and just.
Okay, but what if he did that for justice reasons?
He cannot.
He cannot do it for justice reasons?
Well, he can cause suffering for reasons that he might have that are.
That's what I'm saying.
Shifted the discussion.
That's what I'm saying.
Now he could cause suffering for another reason. That's something else. You were talking about unjustified worldwide suffering.
No. All I said was if God wanted, if God willed, if God desired to cause suffering for everyone on the planet tomorrow for 3 hours.
That has no purpose.
No, I didn't say no purpose. All I said was, God wants to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Is it good?
I can tell I'm really tired. My brain isn't working right. It is not good. Is not defined by some exterior controller where God's behavior says, "Is this all good?" God's character is good. He is the foundation of good. So that means if everyone in the universe is suffering simultaneously, it cannot be for unjust cause.
Okay, so what I'm hearing you say is it would be good.
If God decreed it to be so, it cannot be, and this is the way the Christians reason. I know you're not going to buy this, and I know they're going to have a heyday with it, but it cannot be, logically cannot be against his. Now, the question is, are you in a position to tell God that he's unjustified in that?
No.
Yeah, exactly. Humans are not in a position to be able to judge God's behavior. So you're creating kind of a Fabian situation designed to kind of create kind of a gotcha moment again. God's character will not do what is not good.
Is there any action that one human can do to another that's always, 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 always wrong?
I would say torturing and murdering a person for no just cause of any type.
Okay, that's a great answer. But if all you see is one person
Mm-hmm.
torturing another person, you don't know what's going on, you're just seeing this.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any justification in your worldview to say it's wrong? Always, always.
Now try it one more time. I can tell I'm getting tired. If I see one person who is,
you're a fallible human being. You see one person torturing another person, and then a few hours later killing that person.
Okay.
Do you have any justification within your worldview to say that that is always, always, always wrong?
I have some justification to say it's wrong.
But always wrong?
No, because I don't know. I don't have all the information.
Right. Because it could be God's will that that's happening through justice reasons or reasons beyond ours.
Reason beyond our knowing, yes.
This is where I get a little frustrated with Christians, because you've just admitted relative morality. It depends on the situation. It depends if God sanctioned it.
It's not relative morality when it's based on the character of God.
Right, but your God could choose for this situation for it to be justified for justice reasons, and in the exact same action, but in a different situation, say, no, in this case, it's not.
Are you familiar with virtue ethics?
Yeah.
Okay, well, if you're familiar with virtue ethics and you know the idea that the idea is to inculcate values and qualities that lead towards the good. So in other words, God doesn't want us to do anything specific. Like there's a litany of specific things he wants us to do. God wants us to act lovingly. He wants us to incorporate the virtue of love into our lives. Now, you can call that situational ethics. It's just called virtue ethics, because the virtue of love and justice is interplayed in a dynamic relationship in the context of whatever is happening. So I look at the situation and I say, what is the most loving thing? I pretend I'm a bridge operator, and I have a 4-year-old son, and the bridge goes up and down, and my son falls into the gears. If I don't start the thing going and lift the bridge, 300 people are going to die. Now, what does God demand that I do in that moment? I don't know that God gives us a demand of a litany of things. I think what he's asking for is for us to look with justice and love on this situation and say, what is the right thing to do in this context, looking at love and justice as absolute values that I must embody. That's just different than talking about relative morality. You're talking about virtues that you're trying to build into you as a person. And that's one way of looking at ethics. We haven't even talked about duty-bound ethics.
Yeah. My whole point.
Just because you can point out a situation that says, well, there might be the situation here, that's not relative ethics. That's just simply to say that God's character is simply above he's goodness is greater than an act.
Yeah, the reason why I brought it up is because I hear a lot of Christians say, you know, if you don't believe in God, you can't have this objective morality, because, you know, it seems to me like they really want this certainty that something's always right or something's always wrong.
That's not what we're talking about. I'm talking about.
Yeah, I understand, but this is why I brought it up, and you I think are not like the others. You're saying that no, there could be cases where someone is torturing another person, and if God honestly, sincerely, truthfully sanctioned it, then it becomes good. That's what I'm hearing you say.
That's a bit of a mischaracterization of what I'm talking about, but I hear I get what you're going at.
So, it's getting really late, so maybe we should wrap this up. But I need a favor from you, and I'm being sincere. There is a guy in my YouTube comments, a Christian guy, who is, it's almost like he's holding a shotgun, and he's shooting these pellets of history at me, which I am dubious to believe. I mean, I just don't believe him, and I don't think you would believe him either.
Okay.
But in 2 weeks, he's promised me that he will come on. I would love. He's not going to listen to a word I say because I'm a dirty basement atheist. But if you came on and said, "Look, my fellow Christian who I love dearly, you're wrong here."
Sure.
And
listen. I'm a truth seeker, Doug. If he's not talking the truth about Christ, there's no virtue in that. If he's not talking the truth about history, there's no virtue in that. So if he's saying something that is wrong, I have no problem siding with you, because I'm not siding against him. I'm siding on the side of truth.
Yeah, I think that would be because again, I really don't think he's going to listen to anything I say. So, but he might listen to you.
I feel actually honored that you feel like I'm someone that you could bring in, that you feel like I would seek the truth, not try to just gang up on you.
Yeah, no, I don't think that would happen, and I think it would be a fruitful conversation, and because I really think he's hurting Christianity. I really do.
Well, there's tons of people who have.
Yeah. He's really making you guys look bad.
Worse than I made us look in my last video.
Yeah, but he didn't come on video. He was doing it in chat, and people are way worse in YouTube comments than on video. Like, because on video there's accountability, and that's why I always like talking to people face to face. But in the YouTube comment section, it's like all for. It's a free for all. Yeah. Hey, I would like a clarification before we get off.
Okay. You talked about probability, and you use that term a lot. When we talked about before, you think that Jesus' resurrection is not probable. You think that dragons are just as improbable as Jesus' resurrection.
I don't think I said that, but I do think, I'm a finance guy, so I do think in terms of probability, yes. Okay.
Are you doing Bayesian probability calculus when you talk about those things?
No, I'm not an expert. Cam is the expert in Bayesian, the guy I introduced you to.
Yeah.
So if you want to talk Bayesian, I can set you up with him.
I'm not a numbers guy. I'm a history guy, and what I can tell you is nobody uses Bayesian probability when we're talking about history, because just give you a brief example. What's the problem?
I don't know if that's true. You might be right about ancient history, but
Richard Carrier tried it. It pretty much got shot to shreds. I've seen William Lane Craig do it. I really don't like it when he does that. I think it's a bit farcical. The person, I think that's too far.
I tend to agree with you on what I think the problem is when they try to come up with exact numbers, but your statement Bayesian is not used for history. It depends what you're talking about. Like if we're talking about a diagnosis of someone who died a year ago and looking at the probability of the efficacy of a drug and the all those. How
that's possible.
Yeah.
And
I know is used all the time.
But for example, like what's the probability that the Titanic, a ship built not to sink, is going to sink on its maiden voyage? Like how would you calculate the prior probabilities?
Yeah, the way I would and again, I'm not a Bayesian expert, but the way I would view that is, okay, here we have supposedly the best ship ever built. A person would beforehand say, okay, what's the prior probability that it will sink? Well, people are people. People make mistakes. So it is possible that it will sink. Now,
they said God himself couldn't sink it. Now, my point is not, Doug, it was not to make you be Bayesian calculator. There is a point to this. When you talk about probabilities and you're saying this is an improbable event, you're not doing Bayesian calculations. So what
I agree. On our first conversation,
what you're talking about is what you personally find credible. And that's really different than talking about Bayesian probability.
Yeah, and you notice in our first conversation, I never brought up Bayesian.
Right. And I appreciate that, but you did keep using the word probable.
Yeah.
And I kept trying to point out to you that and I didn't know for sure whether you were using it in a Bayesian or basically a kind of
No, I was using it more to describe what extraordinary means.
Right. It's what you think is probable in the world. Well, at that point, when you're talking about probability, you're now talking about your philosophy of the world. And
yeah, I can see that, but I think we have a lot of agreement, you and I. Like, I think both you and I would say that it is probable that I or you would own a dog. But I think both of us would share the same sentiment that it's not probable that we would own a fire-breathing dragon. So that's why I was using the words in that way.
Yeah, but there, once again, Doug, it goes back to the idea that when we're talking about probabilities, you're not talking about actual math. You're talking about kind of an intuition.
Yes.
And informed thoughts about the world. And those things change from culture to culture. And those things really depend upon how you've been enculturated and taught.
I understand what you're saying,
but
we share it though, right? Like,
we share some of it. I don't hold to a closed worldview.
Right. But
so, for example,
for today, what we see around us, I think you and I would agree on a lot of things.
I think we would.
Yeah. Where we differ is looking back at the past.
Right. If someone that I trusted, like a missionary that we've had come to our church, who I've trusted, who I've known for 10 years, you were to say to me, Mike, we prayed over this guy and he was dead. We did all of our touches and we touched him and we made sure, he was pale. We prayed over him and he was resurrected.
That's happened to you? You've heard that from someone?
I knew. That would be all that I would need to know. Because my worldview isn't shut down and closed. I don't hold a prior probability that can't happen.
Yeah, I don't either.
So the level of the burden of proof is going to be different between you and I. Not because you're smart, I'm dumb, you're smart. It's as we hold different prior beliefs about the world.
So if there were other if there were other claims like Jesus's of people rising from the dead 2,000 years ago.
There's actually a lot of those about history, believe it or not.
So do you believe all of them?
I think you have to look at the evidence. I think you have to take them one by one, and you need to look at them evidentially.
So have you found anything that's akin to Jesus' rise from the dead in history that has better evidence than Jesus?
Better evidence than Jesus? That's a really good question. Better evidence than Jesus is tough because the evidence there is really high. Of Jesus being seen after he was dead. I'm not necessarily making the theological claims. I'd have to really think on that one because that's a really good question. Honestly, I wasn't expecting that. I'd have to think on it. Is that okay?
Yeah, Cam, I think, gave an example of history of some. He gave two examples, but there was some written document on tablets that we have today of someone prayed in Egypt for a storm to come through, and it was during a battle, and the storm actually happened, and they wiped out people, and they have different types of evidence, not just quantity of evidence, but types of evidence for it. And he mentioned another one. And so, but anyhow, I'll talk to Cam about that and see.
Yeah, for me, I would just say I need to look at them line by line, and you just look at which is why I talked about the whole Jesus and the dragon thing. You got to take them one at a time, and you just say, what is the evidence for this? There's evidences there's claims that some of the early apostles did this or that, and you look at them and there's just one account that's giving it from that perspective, and it's difficult to really It's difficult to, like Polycarp was stabbed with a sword, and so much blood poured out that it put out the fire, and a dove flowed out of his body. That's hard to get your head wrapped around. That doesn't fit in my world very well, but I also don't have a closed world, and so I have to look at that and go, okay, what am I looking at here? Is this a part of an apology? And so you just have to examine them one at a time.
Before you go, I just let you know that I view the Gospels as a screenplay. So
that's interesting. Based on what evidence?
Based on, number one, how it reads. I do. Luke is an exception, but I do view Mark, Matthew, and John as more of well, even Luke's not that big of an exception, but more showing literary techniques like irony. Like Jesus in Mark, Jesus comes in. He is the King of Kings, and yet he tells everyone, "Don't tell anyone who I am." That's irony, right? And foreshadowing, lots of foreshadowing in the Gospels. Flawed characters. To me, it reads like a screenplay. Now, does that mean that it's all false? No, I'm not saying that.
How many contemporary screenplays have you read?
What do you mean by contemporary?
Like Lucian.
Well, I've read the Odyssey.
And does it read like the Odyssey?
I don't know if you've ever read the comparisons of the Odyssey to the Gospels, but there's some really amazing comparisons out there. You know, the in the Gospels where Jesus' feet were washed by the woman, and she broke the perfume bottle, alabaster, whatever, and it broke, and then she used her hair to wipe on the feet. There's a very similar narrative of that in Homer's Odyssey, where Homer, just like Jesus, is in his back. He comes back to his hometown area, and here's the king, right? And nobody recognizes him, just like Jesus wasn't recognized. And what happened? He meets this woman who breaks a basin and washes his feet, and he makes the comment of, you really know who I am, but don't tell anyone. And it's just, again, people look at that and they say, well, yeah, but the differences are just overwhelming. But I believe it is a screenplay based on Old Testament mostly, the historical works of the day, probably secondary, and Greek mythology probably thirdly. And it probably there was an apocalyptic preacher named Jesus back then who was maybe from the Essene movement. I don't know. We know from the Dead Sea Scrolls that the Essene movement existed, and they were apocalyptic, and they were preaching very similar things to what Jesus is. So I'm just telling you this to help you understand where I'm coming from.
I hear you. That's an interesting perspective.
When I hear Christians say, "Oh, but Doug, the tomb was empty," I am screaming inside myself saying, "Why do you believe there was a tomb?" Like, I'm taking it to...
You realize there is the sepulcher, the Church of the Holy Sepulcher in Jerusalem, right?
Yeah, but do we know that's the tomb of Jesus? I've heard there's three...
Have you personally seen the Eiffel Tower?
We're talking about extraordinary claims here, right?
Extraordinary claims. Back to that again. It's like your special little wand you get to wave around. I don't have to answer your questions because your belief is just really crazy.
Okay. I'm telling you where I'm coming from.
I hear you.
Okay.
I hear you.
And
you just made a claim about the empty tomb.
And this relates to probabilities because we do know that there's screenplays, there's passion narratives of that time.
What do they look like? Do they look like that?
We do. It doesn't matter. All I'm saying is those exist. And if you agree with me, I can move on. And if you agree that screenplay or passion plays existed back then.
What do you mean by passion plays?
Suffering and then glory at the end. If that...
Like Socrates, who drank the hemlock, that kind of a thing? I'm asking a question.
Just suffering with glory at the end. A narrative where the lead character has to go through some turmoil, some suffering, and at the end is rewarded. That's what I mean by a passion play. Suffering to receive glory.
Okay.
So then I'm just telling you where I'm coming from. A guy like me reads the Gospels, and says, okay, this relates to the probability thing we're talking about. What is more probable? What's more likely? That this amazing, incredible, rare thing happened, these extremely incredible claims actually happened, or it's a screenplay based on a real character. Maybe some things are true, some things are false.
That easily 10,000 people in Israel mistook for an actual event that occurred right around where they lived.
Yeah.
Literally 10,000 people misread that screenplay. I mean, listen, you're going to talk about probabilities. We got to talk about probabilities.
See, I don't even believe that. Like, I believe that by the time I believe the Gospels were written in Rome.
Really?
Yeah. Am I saying that I know this? No. But there's
well, you can believe what you like. I mean,
right,
I just find that interesting. Do you have any evidence it was written in Rome?
Well, just by the level of Greek written and so forth. Now, first of all, am I way off base? Have you never heard this before?
Oh, I've heard all kinds of things before. I mean, you're
this
just
what I'm saying. Have you heard that before?
Not specifically by any number of people. I've heard one or two.
Have you ever heard a historians view the Gospels more like a screenplay than historical narrative?
Yes, I've heard those. I've heard those claims before.
Okay.
But you have to stack them up against Lucian and some of the other plays that are going around.
Okay, so what I'm saying is not you've heard it before then.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Okay, so yeah. Again,
what you're talking about is Christianity started in Jerusalem.
No, not necessarily. I'm saying that the first text written about
the first text written is Paul.
Right.
And Paul writes a letter.
Yeah, Paul to me is the best evidence for Jesus.
Right. And that's the problem, is Paul is writing about Jesus as if he's a real person, not a play person.
Are you sure about that? I don't think that's a slam dunk either.
Don't go down that path with the whole Jesus was that Bart Ehrman's person that was that Bart Ehrman? Bart didn't say that. Who said that? This was
Robert Price, Richard Carrier.
That's the Robert Price, the Richard Carrier, Robert Price thing. Are you really? Is that how far down you've gone?
No. I'm probably 60%. But again, like, which Jesus are we talking about? Are we talking about?
We can establish from Paul, 1 Corinthians 15. Now, of course, what Carrier does is he says 1 Corinthians 15 is interpolated.
Right.
Yeah, that's his, because if it's not interpolated, if 1 Corinthians 15 is not interpolated, that entire theory falls completely apart.
So you don't think it's interpolated?
There's not a single shred of evidence that it's interpolated.
Okay, then why do some historians say it is?
Some historians say it's interpolated. Like the entire element is, well, I know why they say it, because it's damning evidence. It's evidence that's just incredibly difficult to deal with.
So you're saying they're being academic. So you're saying that they're being academically dishonest.
I can tell you how they have to do it. There's only one way to be able to say it's interpolated, because there's no textual variants that are just have the entire 1 Corinthians 15 missing. Just don't have it. There's no textual variances. What they're doing is what's called form criticism or textual criticism.
But what are their arguments? What are their arguments?
They're looking at the Greek words and they're saying, well, this tense doesn't seem to match this tense, and it might not be for this reason. And so what I think is that this seems, and I've heard him use these terms, Carrier, when I read it on him, he said, it just seems so contrived, or it doesn't flow very well. Well, what does he mean by flow very well? I read Greek. I'm able to translate it. I'm able to read it. It makes sense in my translation. So what is he meaning it doesn't read well? Well, there's better ways he could have said what he said. Now, I'm telling you, that's the historical fact.
But he's
not getting it through documents. He's getting it.
Carrier's not alone. Carrier's not alone in his views. Like, are they colluding?
No, that there are, but there's not a lot of people who say all of 1 Corinthians 15 is interpolated.
No, we're just talking about that one verse where it says Paul saw Jesus. That's the one we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you also have to deal with Galatians, where Paul once again claims to be. I mean, these are just there's two. You have to start. This becomes contrived, which is why not a lot of people believe Carrier's argument.
Right, but my point is that Carrier is not alone. Like let's say 10% believe like Carrier does.
10%, really? I would be surprised if it's that high.
No, I'm just talking about the 1 Corinthians 15. I'm not talking about all his views.
There are some people who believe that, but I'm telling you, they're not believing it on based of evidences. They're getting it based on textual readings, which is a question of interpretation. Learn Greek, read it in the Greek, and tell yourself, does this look like it was inserted or not? That's what you do, because there's no textual variants that give him that interpolation. There are, for example, in Josephus, the Syrian account of Josephus's Antiquities has the non-interpolated portion of the statement about Jesus. The Syrianic has what we kind of thought of as the non-interpolated part. So we have textual variances when it comes to Josephus. Where are the textual variances where all of 1 Corinthians 15 or significant portions of it are just missing? They're not there. They're just not there.
Okay. Yeah,
I mean, and that's not to say that you're bad, evil, or wrong. It's to say
no.
You got to deal with the evidence. I want to look at the evidence.
Yeah, my question that I love to ask Christians is, how did you come to the conclusion that this particular historian's correct and this one's wrong? And
I looked at the text. I read Carrier's argument.
So have they. They have looked at the text too.
Well, I do what I do best. I take the evidence and I look at it myself. Carrier's argument did not convince me.
Okay,
now
but that doesn't mean he could be correct though, right?
It seems really convenient for an atheist to suddenly say, well, the part that really damns my part, that Jesus is a myth, also happens to be interpolated. You don't think that there's an element of wishful thinking going on here?
No.
I mean, come on, really.
I don't believe it's. I don't
like that. Otherwise, his theory doesn't work. His theory has to have that. Otherwise, the whole thing doesn't work.
Do you believe that 6 out of the 13 of Paul's letters are forgeries?
6 out of the 13. Which one are you thinking of forgeries?
That's the number I've heard. That the earliest ones are not, and the later ones are forgeries.
Generally, these are the ones that everyone considers to be Pauline. 1 Thessalonians, Galatians, 1 Corinthians, certain portions of 2 Corinthians, Romans. Okay, those are the ones that are absolutely undisputed.
Okay, but so I'm asking you. I'm asking your personal opinion. Do you believe all 13 of Paul's letters are authentic?
I stand with N.T. Wright on this, and this is what he says. He says, I think it's time that we acknowledged that this whole textual criticism and variances, well, not variances, what does he say? We need to reevaluate all of the datings, and I stand with N.T. Wright on that. I think there's a lot of scholarship that's been going on that's been entirely presuppositionally based and not necessarily evidence-based.
So is that a yes? You do believe they're all?
Yeah, I'd say that. I think it's. I'm not saying I know. I'm saying I think it's time that we reevaluate it. I don't know that the church did a really good job. That we've been spending the last 300 years trying to show how bad of a job the church did, and what we've come to is the church did a really good job. We can't prove a few of the 27 books of the New Testament came out of the first century. Almost all the books came out of the first century. Almost all of them. So the church did a better job than what people are giving it credit for. So I'd say I'm willing to take it book by book. Let's go book by book. What's your evidences? I got a name of Ida Linnemann, who's a German biblical scholar, who she went through and she just nickel and dimed every single variance in the Gospels. And she's not convinced that Matthew and Luke are actually dependent on Mark as a source. She's more convinced that there's an oral source that's behind both of them, and that's why there's so many different variances. So, I mean, I think it's an open game, but it's not as That's just you have to take Carrier for where he's at. Where is his evidence? His evidence is an interpretation of a verse that sounds like it doesn't belong.
Somebody
mean by that?
Somebody in chat wants to know if you personally believe that Hebrews is authentic.
No, Hebrews was not written by Paul. All you got to do is read it. I stand with Origen on that one. Origen said, "Who wrote Hebrews? God only knows." But it's a great book. I love the book of Hebrews. I think it was written by Apollos myself.
Okay, it's after 2 a.m. That's like 4 a.m. your time?
5.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, your wife's going to kill me. So, but yeah.
Actually, I really enjoyed this tonight, Doug. I appreciate it. I think we did a lot better this time.
Yeah, I think so too.
Better?
Yeah, I think so too. And let's stay in touch about getting together with this other Christian guy. I forget his name.
The next week, I'm doing my last doctoral class, so I won't be around for the next week. But after that, I'll be all available.
Okay. Yeah, I think this is 2 weeks from now. So.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
Have a good night. Apologize to your wife for me.
I'm gonna go take a shower and hit my day, I think.
Okay. Take care.
All right, bye.
Okay, guys. This I'm assuming everybody in chat is from Europe, or just unemployed in the United States or Canada. But anyhow, yeah, that was interesting. I can hardly wait to watch it back and see what happened. Take care. Good night, guys.